the Storm Tracker Podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker Podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. And today I've got John Garcia Jr. joining me from Rivals.com, national recruiting analyst, to talk a little Miami Hurricanes recruiting. How you doing today, John?
I'm doing great. You know, high school football is back down here, and obviously college is gearing up. So it's a beautiful time of year.
Yeah, it's the most exciting time of the year because guys like us, we get to watch actual football, not 7-on-7, not camps, but actual football. So I'm excited about that. And you and I, we got to see one of the premier athletes in the state of Florida, Miami commit Gerard Pringle, last weekend against Miami Norland. And those boys from Tampa put up 50 points on Miami Norland, and a lot of it had to do with the 4-star running back commit Gerard Pringle. I mean, you and I, we were out there. Just your general opinion of him, his performance, and just what Miami is getting with him.
Yeah, I thought on some of his bigger plays, I was sort of, to be expected with him. Look, the 80-yard run, you knew if he got behind the first and second level with his 10.5 speed, nobody was going to catch him. He had a long screen, I believe a long kick return as well. Those were sort of to be expected. Where I was surprised in a very good way with Pringle was everything else, the toughness, the consistency, the steadiness that he ran in between the tackles. I mean, those 4, 5, 6-yard gains were tough for a kid who is known as a track star, as you're seeing right here. So we knew about the open field speed and the acceleration and the burst, but I thought his pad level, his maintenance in between the tackles, his vision, his patience, I thought all of that was just as impressive going up against a front that has several Saturday and maybe a Sunday player or two, with Miami Norland. So I thought his vision and balance were really impressive, in addition to the expected home run ability when he did, see some daylight, which he took advantage of for around, 200 yards from scrimmage. So I thought going into it, if Pringle was a dude in this game against this defense, when all eyes were going to be on him, I thought it was going to be impressive. And that's exactly what he showed. And on top of it, played a little bit of defense and obviously showed that he's in great shape, because the real field was like 100 degrees on the field. We were all, chugging Gatorade and water down there just on the sidelines. And this kid was not only the workhorse back for Armwood, but played a little bit of defense, never lost his energy, never lost his effort level. And I thought that was just as impressive as his physical performance. But no doubt this is a kid that is a more complete back than maybe his athletic profile would suggest. And that's a huge compliment, going into your senior year.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thoroughly impressed by Pringle last Saturday, just with his balance. I mean, this is a guy who was bouncing off of tackles of, 300-pound guys, So I think his strength was something that really kind of impressed me. And then, yeah, he's got that breakaway speed to kind of take it the distance as well. Miami's got a gem there in Pringle. You got to give props to the Miami staff just with their evaluations, because this is a kid who was kind of under the radar. I mean, when he committed, he was a 3-star by Rivals. And then, after some reevaluations, we kind of realized, okay, well, this guy is a legit player that can play.
Yeah, we're probably still too low, to be honest.
Probably. Yeah. He can play at a high level at the college level, and I think he probably will be a dynamic player on the NFL level as well once he gets there. So definitely great stuff that we saw from Gerard Pringle. But this class overall is really impressive. Right now, they're the 5th ranked class in the nation. And you got a lot of players from Florida, South Florida as well, from the powerhouses. You got the 1 5-star in Drake Stubbs. A boatload of DBs are in this class as well. Just when you look at this class, John, what are some of the positives that you see with this 2025 class that, could not even be done yet.
Right. Well, it's still TBD, but I really love the back seven grouping that this staff has put together with the class. The linebackers and DBs together, I feel like in this group are pretty much completed. Now you're still going to go after DJ Pickett. I don't want to silence any of that potential momentum. But if you don't get them, you've got a great group of both linebackers and secondary prospects committed. And I say that both in quality and quantity. There's a lot of volume with these guys, but they're just about all blue chip recruits, and they're all different, which is something that I really enjoy in watching a school put together a position group within one recruiting class. I mean, you go to the secondary, obviously you've got Drake Stubbs as your headliner, your classic free safety. And then you look at some of the corner types, Bryce Fitzgerald, bigger, more athletic, developing as a corner compared to a Chris Ewald, who is very technically sound, extremely experienced being out on the island as maybe a guy who is more suited to play some zone stuff. Then you've got, bigger, more physical athletes like Jabari Antoine, Timothy Merritt, verbally committed. That could be hybrid guys. Maybe they're corners, maybe they're nickels, depending on how, they develop. So I love the versatility and the star power of the secondary. And then with the linebackers, again, little bit of everything in this group. You've got your short sideline to sideline guy who's going to rack up the tackles in Ezekiel Marcelin. You've got your home run hitting downhill thumper in Elijah Melendez. You've got your future captain of the defense in Gavin Nix, who's maybe a blend of those two guys. So I just really like the type of player they're bringing in and how they complement one another in that back seven. But like you said, the whole class is strong. There's spot recruiting wins everywhere. Big O-line group once again. Max Buchanan from Orlando, stud. Absolutely a guy that we just move up the rankings every single update because he continues to impress. So just a little bit of everything on this commitment list, but particularly that back seven. It's like ready to go right now, which is pretty ideal for the month of August.
Sorry, I had to take myself off mute there. Going to show some highlights of Drake Stubbs, the 5-star, recently minted 5-star. Yeah, this defensive back group, I think it's really impressive how they were able to get a Jabari Antoine. I think everybody kind of felt like Chris Ewald was going to be committed to the Hurricanes at some point, but to get a guy like Drake Stubbs to flip from USC to Miami, that's really, really impressive from this Miami Hurricane staff. And then you add, an Amari Wallace, who I think is a really smart player, physical guy, probably going to play that nickel position. And Timothy Merritt is kind of a player that was the first defensive back committed to this class, is maybe a forgotten player of that defensive back group. He's long, physical, very quick as well, great instincts. So I think the defensive back group is definitely the strong suit. But on the flip side, John, it seems like two position groups are kind of like, you kind of wish maybe you had some more players committed. And those positions for me are defensive tackle. I think they just added a Micah Newton and they just added a Dante Simpson. Before that, they were at 0 at that spot. And then wide receiver. Right now they still just have a Dalen Upshaw committed to the class. So just talk about a little bit about the ground that Miami can really make up at those two position groups.
Yeah, well, you're seeing sort of avenue one is the flip game, right? You flip Dante Simpson from Maryland, you flip Micah Newton from NC State, which I do think still shows the brand power, especially with in-state recruits, the ability to close distance in a hurry if the board does get to a certain level of prospect, which I still think is important. Those are high 3-star guys who are incredibly high floor guys, so they're not going to be, 5-star type guy, Justin Scott type of let's rally the class around him type of guys. But in terms of what they do right now, it translates today to the collegiate level. They just might not have as much more room to grow physically as some of the higher ranked guys at those positions. So I do like that Miami has started to address that need on the defensive interior. So we'll see how it goes, going forward. I think receiver is more of a head scratcher. It's puzzling. This has been, a very unique approach from Miami's standpoint. Look, it's August 22nd as we record this. We know there's still a whole season to go ahead of us. Early signing day. We know Miami can close. We know Kevin Beard's a great recruiter. We saw the receiver group they brought in last cycle, which was elite. Not knocking any of those individual things, but in terms of just looking at this class, just having Dalen Upshaw as a verbal commitment at that position with the available recruits in state and even local to Miami has been a disappointment. I mean, I don't really think you could characterize it another way. There's a lot of Dade and Broward and Palm Beach talent that is committed to other Power 5 programs. I mean, big time recruits and big time schools alike. So I do think that those are going to be elements to keep an eye on as things move forward, with this Miami group. And we talked about it at DT. You got to go to the flip game. Probably going to be the case at wide receiver if you want to be picky. So can you flip Josh Moore from Florida, from Pembroke Pines? Can you flip a Dallas Wilson from Tampa Bay Tech, who's committed to Oregon for like a year and a half at this point? Can you execute one of those two, pair it with a Dalen Upshaw, and then still shoot your shot for a Jaime Ffrench type, who we assume, despite an August 30th commitment date, his recruitment is going to continue and roll into the season and certainly early signing day. So I think there's still a lot in front, for Miami at the receiver position. But in terms of wins, tangible wins, who you got right now, it's certainly disappointing relative to really double-digit receivers in state and or close to home that are 4-star, high 4-star guys that you've passed on mainly willingly, which I think is the key here. So maybe there's a bigger plan at play. Maybe they're in better position for Ffrench than we think right now. And maybe there's more traction for Wilson than we think right now, or Josh Moore. Maybe all of that is in motion and we just don't know. And we'll say, oh, okay, they figured it out. But tangibly right now, that's the biggest disappointment on the commitment list.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. As far as receivers is concerned, I don't want this to be a class that Hurricanes fans look back at and say, oh, we should have got Cortez Mills or we should have got Nashawn Montgomery, these type of guys, and they ball somewhere else, like that's kind of the fear right now, because if you let those type of guys who are playing literally in your backyard go ball somewhere else, then you're going to be kicking yourself that, you didn't get those type of guys. They tried to go all in on a Vernell Brown, who ended up, of course, committing to Florida. I do think Josh Moore is a possibility. From the last time that we spoke to him at the Football Hotbed Media Day, it seemed like he is still kind of keeping his options open, wants to see how the season goes. I think a lot of these kids are looking to see just how well these teams perform on the field. And I think if Miami has a successful season, especially, throwing the football, then I think that they should be in a good position for Josh Moore. But you did mention Jaime Ffrench. He is one of the 5 stars that is technically, I guess, on the board for Miami. It's Texas, it's Tennessee, it's Miami, and it's LSU. From what I gathered from him the last time I spoke to him, it seemed like it was a Miami LSU battle, but now we're hearing Texas smoke. So first, let's kind of talk about him and just, the chances of Miami maybe landing a Jaime Ffrench. And there's some other 5 stars as well, DJ Pickett, Elijah Griffin, that Miami is interested as well. What are the chances Miami first, gets Ffrench?
Yeah, I think it just depends. Are you looking at it for August 30th or are you looking at it for December 4th? Obviously, the latter date is where things become official. So it's the most important date in his recruitment. And, he's a kid who you understand, right? He's been committed in the past, right? He was committed to Alabama under Nick Saban and backed off once he retired, which is very understandable. But Ffrench is a kid who, since his freshman year, has been a high-level recruit, a guy who was always projected to be in that 4-star, 5-star range. So he has relationships going back a very long time with some of these programs and some of these coaches in particular. But his group of finalists is fascinating, right? 4 schools, Texas, LSU, Tennessee, Miami, that are comfortable in the NIL game. So I don't think any one amount is going to sway him versus the other. And then you hear from Jaime, like you said, Marcus, after his last visit, it looks like, well, if it's a family deal and familiarity, well, Miami's the only in-state school, and there's obviously plenty of familiarity down here. His teammate Drake Stubbs is committed as well, or LSU, where he has a lot of family ties. I mean, his last name is Ffrench, for goodness sake. So you understand some of that. But like you said, the most consistent buzz has been with Texas, both before the official visit run and after the official visit run. I think part of that is because Texas is in need of another alpha receiver. The number 1 receiver in Texas, De'Corian Moore, was committed to LSU, and then he flipped to Oregon, right? So you missed out on him. So Ffrench becomes one of the most important guys thereafter to try to lock in for Texas. But look, Texas hasn't closed incredibly well. Of the top 8 recruits in the state of Texas, 0 are committed to Texas, coming off of a college football playoff run. So there is something to be said for that. And I think it leaves the door open a little bit more for Miami than maybe you would think optically with about a week to go in this recruitment. Now, Miami has been the sticky program with Jaime. Like every time a school trends, Miami's always like that other school. So it's been as consistent as any for him, even dating back to before the Alabama commitment last year. It was like Alabama, FSU, Miami. Then he decommits from Alabama, and it's like Ohio State, FSU, Miami. And then time goes on, and now it's Tennessee, LSU, Tennessee, and Miami. So the Canes have been the consistent program with him dating back to his upperclassman status a year ago. So I do think that could be part of the reason why we've seen the Canes say thanks but no thanks to some kids closer to home. Now, is that, arrogance? How much is that confidence going to come back to bite you if you don't win this recruitment? I don't know. But receiver has been puzzling to the point where there has to be some traction with Jaime Ffrench. Like, you got to be in the ball game here. Between Ffrench, Vernell Brown, as you mentioned, Dallas Wilson, between those 3 guys, maybe a Josh Moore, you got to grab multiple, it feels like, between that group of 4, because you said no to Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach kids that want to be Hurricanes. So I do think that it's going to be fascinating, but it also, just reporters' intuition tells me that Miami, whether it's August 30th or later, is going to continue to stick around for Jaime Ffrench. I know they're going to invite him to games. I know he's probably going to take in a game or 2. And we know, Cristobal, Kevin Beard, everyone's going to continue to push resources that way until he signs and makes this thing official. He's that good.
Yeah, as we're seeing on this highlight, he's just absolutely explosive and elusive. Like, just catches everything and just pushing defenders on the ground. I mean, this is one of the best tapes I've seen for this particular class. He's just, and then when you watch him in 7-on-7, he's even more, I would say, dynamic as well. So Miami, I feel like this is kind of a must get, though, right? It feels like a must get for Miami to kind of land a Jaime Ffrench right now, especially since he is now a 5-star as well on Rivals. I think just optically, it would just look great to pull him in to the class here. But if they don't, if they don't, John, it's like, where do they go? Where do they go? Like if Ffrench, let's just say he commits to Texas, right? And then Dallas Wilson stays put with Oregon, and Josh Moore stays put with Florida. Vernell Brown stays put with Florida. Like, you're just gonna have just Dalen Upshaw as your one lone guy. Last cycle, they were able to get a tremendous haul with Nye Carr, JoJo Trader, and Chance Robinson, all 4-star guys. It just seems a little dire at this point, but you can't really doubt this coaching staff at all because they are big flippers, I would say. We saw it last year with a Jordan Lyle and a Justin Scott, where they flipped those guys late. And Aldarius Hayes as well, flipping him from Florida late. So I would imagine that we are going to see maybe 2 to 3 flips before December happens. But right now, it kind of looks bleak with the wide receiver position if Ffrench does not indeed choose the Hurricanes next week. August 30th is that date, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it to see who he indeed picks. Now, just wanted to kind of touch on the other 5 stars as well that Miami could possibly get. DJ Pickett obviously chose LSU. Elijah Griffin trending towards Georgia. I think everybody is pretty much thinking that is going to be a Georgia choice for the 5-star D tackle. Do you think there's another 5-star in the cards for the Canes before it's all said and done? It's on signing day.
Yeah, I think so. I know we did the Factor of Fiction about 3 5-stars, but you got to get to 2 before you get to 3. So you got Stubbs in the fold, and look, you're gonna have to battle to hold on there. But yeah, I think Ffrench, just like you said, I think you said it best. He's a must-get guy. I think he's the one that you feel best about of the remaining receivers, mainly because he's the only uncommitted one at this stage of the game, and we know he's made that tough decision to back off of a commitment in the past. So you feel like you're going to stay in that ball game regardless of where he commits on the 30th. I think Griffin's going to be tough. Look, it's an in-state interior D lineman, who Georgia really wants. I mean, just that alone at that position, at that school, it's just hard. It's just hard. There's just certain uphill battles that you still fight and you still allocate resources to. And Miami could be as high as second place in this race, and that's something to be said because transition happens in this sport, right? I mean, this is the the quiet time before the season starts, but we get to November and there's going to be a couple firings out there, which means assistant coaches start to get looked at, and when you're Georgia, especially now with Saban gone at Bama, your assistants are going to be first in line for a lot of these phone calls. So you just never know with a powerhouse commitment list. We see it every single cycle. So saying in second place is not the worst thing in the world there, but I do think Georgia is obviously the leader in that clubhouse. And then, we'll see with Ffrench. We'll see with Ffrench down the line. You feel like they have to stay in there. And then with Pickett, look, this is another one. It feels just like Jamie. If you drew up the Miami board, I'm not sure Pickett wouldn't be number 1 overall, for the Canes. This is a unicorn recruit, 6'4", 180, who can play corner. I mean, he's that athletic. That alone is crazy to say out loud. I don't think I ever have on a podcast like this. So Miami's going to stay in that race. There was some traction for really all of his finalists before he came off the board, including Miami. There's some Miami commitments who were very confident that Pickett was going to join them in the secondary. Drake Stubbs is recruiting his tail off to try to pair himself with DJ. So there's a lot still to be had in that race. He's already confirmed that he's going to take some trips. I believe he'll see Miami play at the end of the month, up in Gainesville against the Gators. Of course, Florida's a team that still wants to bring him in as well. So he's another one that I think, depending on how the season goes, it could have a big impact on his final destination. We know Miami's got family ties. It's the closest school that was an actual finalist. Florida did not have a hat on the table when he made that verbal commitment, I believe, last month. And we know he's going to see Hurricanes games. So those three elements point the arrow up for Miami again until signing day. And like you said earlier, with this coaching staff, you never say never, and you just know there's going to be a splash. It's just orchestrated that way under Mario Cristobal. That's why he's one of the top recruiters in the country, and that's why Miami now is kind of expected to have a top 5, top 10 class every single cycle, and anything less is a disappointment. So those guys know, hey, that this is how we got to play the game. And November, December is closing time or flipping time, and Miami has come up very positive on both of those fronts over the last 2 years. So no reason to think, especially with the on-field expectation elevated, no reason to think that this cycle would be any different.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 cycles ago, 8th ranked class last year, 5th ranked class right now, 5th ranked class. It sounds like this team could possibly have a top class. Like, say if they do, get an Elijah Griffin or a Jaime Ffrench, I think maybe those 2 players alone will have them in the top 3. And then, if they can also flip DJ Pickett, who knows, maybe they have a top class. This is crazy to even fathom at this moment. But I think it's a real possibility. I really do think it's a real possibility, especially if they're successful on the field. And I think success to me is just a playoff appearance. This fan base has been, scathing for some kind of success since that, run with Mark Richt and Malik Rozier, where they went 10-0. I think Miami's still living in that Notre Dame game where, it was a crazy atmosphere and they blew out the Irish. I think they're still living in that moment, and they're hoping for moments like that this season. And if they do, then I think, a top class is definitely in the cards. Let's fast forward a little bit to the season, man, because next week we are starting the football season, at least for the Miami Hurricanes. I'll be going to the Swamp for the first time. I'm pretty excited, John, to kind of go out there and really kind of see what this team does. I mean, the hype train has been overwhelming, but I think fans do want to know what freshmen from last year's class will truly make an impact in this 2024 season. You had 3 5-stars. You had Marquise Lightfoot, you had Armando Blunt, and Justin Scott. You had a couple of near 5-stars in JoJo Trader and Zaquan Patterson. Bobby Pruitt, linebacker from Alabama, has been really great in camp. OJ Frederic has been impressing in camp as well. But out of all these guys from the 2024 class, which do you think will most likely make the biggest impact this season?
Well, we talked about the need for interior guys in this class, and it's hard to stack great classes together at the same position. And I think part of the reason why Miami's off to a slow start is because Justin Scott is becoming sort of everything that most people expected. I think he's going to have an opportunity on that 2 deep. I think Armando Blunt is in that conversation as well, because when you look for impact, it doesn't necessarily mean total snaps, right? It's who's going to have an opportunity on, in Scott's case, a 3rd and goal, at the 1, can you bring him in there and make a play? Or, in Blunt's case, hey, it's 3rd and 16, game on the line. Are you going to have an opportunity to be in that rotation to get after the passer and pull a Reuben Bain? So in those regards, I'll go with D lineman because they naturally rotate anyway. Right. You think about game 1 in the Swamp, it is not going to be cold outside. It's going to be loud. It's going to be a lot all at once. So you understand why you could say, hey, let's keep it simple. Get in there, occupy this gap, get in here, shade this tackle, and this is your pass responsibility. So those are positions we typically expect to see a little bit more impact. But if you're talking just snap count, offensively, I just feel like JoJo Trader is going to get his hands on the ball somewhere.
Yeah.
Can he be a factor in the return game? Can he be a gadget guy that you just, hey, here's a jet sweep, here's a bubble screen just to see what he can do. I could see that in a situational role. And then on the other side of the ball, his former high school teammate, Zaquan Patterson, just can do too many things to not play, I feel like. So whether it's somewhere in the nickel rotation, certainly special teams, and those coverage units where he was so good and willing in high school, which I think shows just, how much of a true football player he is. I think he's going to find a way to not only, see some snaps, but make a play or two along the way. That's just who he is as a football player. And again, physically college ready, with his frame as well. So kind of a cop out on my end, but I think the higher ranked guys are going to be those in the best position to come in and splash on this unit. But the fact that there's no clear cut, hey, this freshman's got a chance to start type of storyline is actually a good thing. It shows the depth and of these last few recruiting classes, and of course the portal and development along the way. So those are actually very good scenarios for Miami right now, that you're not saying, hey, we're recruiting so well, but these guys all got to play as teenagers. It's not quite, that desperate, which I think is a very good situation, which is another reason why, like you said, the hype train is kind of overwhelming at this point.
Yeah, it's a very good point that a lot of freshmen aren't, clear cut going to play, because in previous years you kind of already knew like some freshmen were going to get on the field no matter what. Last year with Ruben Bain and Francis Malinoa, for example. But one last player I do want to mention, and I kind of forgot to mention this to you earlier, is Elijah Lofton. Elijah Lofton is a guy who I could see getting some snaps. Now, he's not going to start over an Elijah Arroyo or the 9-year or 15-year veteran Cam McCormick. Cam McCormick's going to be used mainly as a blocking type of tight end. I think Riley Williams kind of took a step up. Looks like he really kind of filled his body out from what I've seen in camp. But Elijah Lofton can be a gadget player. He can be a player that lines up in the backfield. He can probably line up in the Wildcat, or an H-back. I could see him even in the slot as well. He's that versatile. So I don't think he's necessarily in the too deep, but I think he can definitely be a chess piece for Miami should they, choose to utilize him and they feel like he's ready. So he's the one player for me that I think, watch out for if he gets the ball in his hands or you see him lined up in a formation in the swamp or any games afterwards, because from what we've seen in camp, kid's a monster. Absolute monster, John. Like when you see this guy on the field, you're going to be like, whoa, okay, this is what the hype was about. So excited to see all of these freshmen get on the field at some point this season for the Miami Hurricanes. That is going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Once again, John Garcia joining me from Rivals.com, national recruiting analyst. Hopefully we'll see each other again very soon. Actually, we'll see each other again Saturday, right? There's like a bunch of great games.
There are some big games down here.
Yeah, Milton and American Heritage. I'll be there for that one. Got St. John Bosco and Bishop Gorman, Lofton's alma mater, coming down to South Florida to meet the South Florida Power, St. Thomas Aquinas and Chaminade Madonna. But see you then. But I'll see you again on this podcast as well.
Sounds good, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, make sure you subscribe to Kane. We actually have a promotion going on Rivals right now until Friday, 8/23. Subscribe to canescounty.com and rivals.com for 60% off of your annual subscription. Use the promo code Kickoff 2024. Also, remember to subscribe to this podcast on all platforms and also subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Until the next episode.